Welcome back, Bantwana Benkosi. I'm going to shift gear now to the question of the trade policies of the United States. The decision by Donald Trump to sustain the assault, as it were. And I'm joined by Hlelo Giyose, Chief Investment Officer and Principal at Avenue Investment Management, who has written extensively in many instances to try and help us make sense not only of this trade approach on tariffs by Donald Trump, but also to make sense of the manner in which he's doing it outside the diplomatic protocols. And he's joining us from the US. Hlelo, how are you?
Very, very well. Thank you. The good doctor.
Now
Thank you for having me, by the way.
your accent finally fits where you are, you know. Where in the US are you?
I'm just in a little town outside of Boston.
Boston,
Portsmouth.
Massachusetts.
Yes, sir.
Okay, excellent. Thanks indeed for creating time. We're going to take it a bit slow to make sense of, and I want to start with the thing you call the Lollapalooza effect.
Yes.
What is that?
Yes. So Lollapalooza effect is a term used in psychology, but what it refers to is a phenomenon, a mental dissonance, cognitive dissonance, meaning that a severe state of confusion caused by information, which when you look at, looks factual, but for it to be true requires quite a unique set of circumstances to have happened. So it's almost unbelievable for it to come into existence. When you look at it, you say to yourself, this is only possible in an extremely remote sense. It's not part of any normalcy of either political life or scientific life or athletic life or any other endeavor, field of endeavor that you're in. So when you take what Donald Trump said, for instance, that South Africa is committing genocide against white people, when you look at that and you say, there is no way this is correct. And Donald Trump, by the way, knows that. He's not really talking to you about that. What he's doing, he goes a step further. He telegraphs to you that if you do not, and then he gives you a remedy. He gives you a remedy if you do not address A, B, C, D, and E. Okay? This is what I'm going to do. Okay? I'm going to give white people in South Africa refuge in the United States. You think about it and you say, how can this be possible? So you spend a lot of time, as we did South Africa, trying to explain to him how he is incorrect, which is completely wrong. You don't try to explain to someone why he is incorrect when he is negotiating that way. What you try to do is to get to his interests and say, can you put this aside? Let's talk about your interests. Okay? And his interests are extremely difficult. So the reason why he comes up with something that is completely incredulous, like genocide, is because he wants you to walk away from BE. He wants you to walk away from all the regulations you put in place that protect local industry at the expense, in his opinion, of the World Trade Order, from which not only America has benefited, but other countries like China, as you know, have benefited, Singapore, and so on. But if he told you to walk away from those things, walk away from BRICS, you'd say no, and then you'd have an argument. And so he's not going to tell you about those. He's going to tell you about something that is of deep personal interest to you, that almost makes you look bad, so that when you come to negotiate on what he wants, there is no win-win. You give up 100% because you're trying to now remedy something that he told you about, which is completely unrelated to what he wants. This is how you establish mental dissonance, cognitive dissonance in someone's mind.
Okay, let me take the headlines and we'll get back right into it after the headlines. Please stay tuned. I'm going to take the headlines with Nyakalo Defu.
Stay informed. Power Talk with Mbuyiseni Ndlozi, 9 a.m. to midday on Power 98.7.
We're looking into those trade wars by Donald Trump and trying to understand specifically the manner in which he's deploying the trade wars using non-diplomatic means, non-diplomatic channels. And I'm with Hlelo Giyose, who is speaking to us from somewhere in Boston, Massachusetts. Hlelo?
Yes, sir.
Yes, please proceed. I mean, I don't know if you had completed your thought before I launch into a sort of a different nuance. Do you want me to proceed, or you want to conclude what you were saying before the news?
Well, let me just conclude and say that the real issue here is not to get distracted by the genocide issue. All right. The real issue here is to take South Africa, because let's be useful to your listeners and let's be useful to ourselves. Right. The real issue here is to take South Africa, compare it to Vietnam, compare it to Malaysia, compare it to Indonesia, compare it to the enclave where economic activity, manufacturing is now taking place to replace China or to partner China, all right, in supplying goods, manufactured goods to the rest of the world. And South Africa is falling behind. Vietnam is growing at 8%. South Africa is growing at 1%, right? So the real issue is South Africa should look within itself to reduce what the United Nations Commission for Trade and Development Agency calls non-tariff barriers. And South Africa has tons of those. Tons of those. They're meant to protect local industry. They're meant to protect jobs, for instance, but they're not meant to modernize the economy. Okay, they're not meant to attract more capital. They're not meant to create wealth on a per capita basis. And they're causing friction between how capital flows around the world to find opportunity, okay, and the rest of the world. That's really the problem here that everyone who's concerned about tariffs is trying to get to, including the World Trade Organization. And Donald Trump wants to have that conversation. When he tries to have that conversation, he knows people don't want to listen, so he goes another way. He puts up something else in order to get you back onto the table.
Okay, so let me understand why not be direct? Why take the cover of a lie? Why not say we have a problem with black economic empowerment because and I will go to some of the sort of common or similar examples of non-tariff barriers that sort of attain in other countries and specifically China. But why not have that open conversation? Why use the cover of an open lie, a white genocide? He possibly does believe. Why not agree that Donald Trump does believe that there is this thing called white genocide?
And you know what? Donald Trump may very well believe that, by the way. He may very well believe that. That's a different question from why not just have that conversation. Let me tell you why he's not having the conversation directly. It's not because he's not having it directly. It's because countries around the world, not just the United States, including South Africa, countries around the world have had problems with each other with regard to non-tariff barriers. And they've tried to address these problems at the World Trade Organization, and countries have failed. Okay. The United States has tried itself. I'll give you a very good example. Today, South Africa is stuck at the World Trade Organization trying to address a non-tariff barrier that the European Union put on South Africa. You might remember this last year on the fruit and citrus exports from South Africa to the EU. The EU wants South Africa to harvest fruit, put it in a cooling area for 25 days to make sure that it doesn't have bacteria before it gets to the European Union. By the time it gets there, it's not fresh anymore and it has lost market to Spanish fruits. That's a non-tariff barrier. It's called phytosanitary barriers, right? And you can count phytosanitary barriers alongside other barriers such as BE, by the way, which is not only practiced in South Africa, but South Africa copied that from Malaysia. Malaysia copied that, maybe perhaps started at the same time as Nigeria with indigenization in 1972, right? And so these are not, China has that, as you say, strategic national interest, where you have to partner with the local to start any kind of business. India has that. So the world has tried to address this issue at the World Trade Organization. Country upon country upon country has tried to. Nothing has worked. Now, let me tell you the reason why Donald Trump thinks that he has the ability, or America has the ability to address this unilaterally. The United States consumer is what is referred to in economics as a monopsony. Monopsony is when you dictate demand. When you are 62% of the world's demand, you are the sole customer. You are a monopoly of customers. You have a whole bunch of suppliers, countries around the world who manufacture to send goods to you. So you as a customer can dictate the terms of your purchase, okay? And he says, World Trade Organization, you aren't working. By the way, everyone says that. And he says, I have something different that no one else has. I have significant buying power, purchasing power as a monopsony of consumption. I will tell you what I think the World Trade Order needs to look like.
Okay, and just before I move on the sort of how this attains in other countries, you seem to have an advice to so to speak about what South Africa should have done when the question, or at least when it realizes that BEE is the problem. What should they have done with Donald Trump? What cards should they have played?
So just look at what happened this week in Malaysia. Malaysia has a BEE program. Malaysia is facing tariffs of about 46%. Malaysia has been discussing with the United States to remove BE, right? To remove BE. And that's a sticking point with Malaysia. Malaysia says it's non-negotiable because they have to go back to society and discuss, because it's an election point. If you remove BE in Malaysia, you lose power. Same as South Africa. I think if you, as the ANC, come back to the public and you say, I'm removing BE, all right? That is possibly an election point, okay? You can't just say that I'm removing BE. You have to say, these are the regulations that I need to remove in order for the economy to move a lot quicker, a lot faster, okay? We need to figure out ways in which Black people can participate in the economy, right? At an increased speed. Now, what I mean by increased speed is this. The economy in South Africa is moving way too slowly because of leakage of regulation, red tape, and corruption. Way too slowly. This is the reason why we're not creating jobs. It is not because of anything else other than this leakage. Now, you need to remove regulations. You need to remove red tape. You need to figure out how to deal with corruption, right? In order for BE to actually have effect. But BE simply means provide opportunity for everyone. Provide opportunity for everyone, okay? That's the conversation that South Africa should have done. Gone to Donald Trump and says, can you help me workshop how I can move the economy faster with Black people in it if I remove this key piece of legislation? How can I do that, right?
And what
Because
confidence? Why are you so confident that Trump would have an interest in the advancement of Black players in the economy? Why would he be interested in that?
Well, let me tell you what Donald Trump has just done. He just had a conversation with Japan. He just announced a deal with Japan. He just announced a deal, by the way, with Vietnam, also with the Philippines, in which he's had to demonstrate an interest. He's had to demonstrate an interest in the auto industry, which is the key industry in Japan. The auto industry of Japan. That auto industry in Japan employs not only hundreds of billions of Japanese yen in research and development, but millions of workers in Japan. If you remove all the workers in Japan, you lose elections. South Africa now has a 30% tariff. The auto industry in South Africa, BE or not, is going to die. Okay? So Donald Trump has an interest in getting exports from other countries into the United States on one condition, that exports from the United States can get into South Africa. He has no interest whatsoever in killing industry other than to allow goods to flow back.
But the auto industry in South Africa does not have a problem with BEE.
Yes.
What interest?
Yes.
Which capitalist interest is Donald Trump speaking for that have a problem with BEE, international capital? Because the problem of BEE has been communicated by domestic capitalists. It's not even, the big guns. The banks don't have a problem with BEE. The mines don't have a problem with BEE. It's a very small section or fraction of South Africa's capital. Whose interest is this BEE that Donald Trump is campaigning for?
No. So I think, let me just explain the problem this way, okay? If you're an American company or a foreign company, forget American company, any foreign company that exports into South Africa, right? You hit what is a low excise tariff at the port, 1%. That's not a problem, right? That's not a problem. So you hit that and you pay it. Okay, after you pay it, you put your product in the store. You compete against other products that are partly manufactured in South Africa. These products that are manufactured in South Africa get a VAT refund, 15.5% now or 15% now, okay? So add 7% to 15% or 15.5%, you're 21% down as a foreigner. Now you have to compete against that, right? You keep having to cut costs wherever you are, to cut costs in order to make up the 2 and 1% you will lose when you compete with a locally produced product, okay? You keep having to cut costs wherever you are, you do that, you keep doing that, and every year, you are cutting costs faster than a local manufacturer. And at some point you say, you know what, I don't want to have to pay the 7% average tariff at the ports. I also want to get a VAT refund. So I want to set up in South Africa. The minute you try to set up in South Africa, sectors have charters. Financial services charter, there's a fishing charter, there's a mining charter, there's an airline charter. You cannot own more than X amount if you're a foreigner, and so on and so on. Yeah. You want to set up a movie studio here, local content, right? So we have over-regulated the economy such that if you want to avoid the excise tariff at the port and you want to benefit from that, you have another barrier, which is find a black partner to partner with.
Yeah, but I'm saying, where is the evidence that capital has a problem with this? You're not providing that evidence,
right?
That there's capital that has explicitly expressed problems. We know the problems that capital, at least in South Africa, international capital operating in South Africa and domestic capital. Yes, red tape, there's a big problem, and there's an acknowledgement even by government. There's a unit inside the presidency to that effect. But who are these capitalists that operate in South Africa as an example, as evidence, that have said we have a problem with a non-tariff barrier called BEE?
Let me take you back to when BEE was first promulgated across sectors. The first time was promulgated in the mining sector. I think it must have been the year 2000 or the year 1999. If you recall, when it was announced that mining companies have to allocate a certain amount of equity to Black people, okay? And they have to fund it themselves, okay? Guess what happened to share prices, okay? Share prices started to reflect that, so they fell in order to reflect.
But they recovered.
The portion that's going to be, and they recovered. So what I'm trying to say here
is
not that they don't recover.
You're supposed to give me evidence
Right.
of capitalists who said, we are not happy, we can't operate. In the last 10 years of Donald Trump's coming into political prominence, and who have put a case in the world, anywhere in the world or here in South Africa, that we have a problem with BEE. I'm not sure on what grounds.
No. But what I'm trying to point out to you is, look at foreign direct investment. Are you making the point through your question that foreign direct investment in South Africa, gross fixed investment is up in South Africa, or is it down?
But why is it not? Why is it in that state because of BEE? Why it's not because of other reasons? And I'll give you an example. President Mbeki's conversation directly now with international investors that are operating in South Africa says, we have done everything, in relation to what the terms are in the Washington Consensus, or the so-called Washington Consensus. What is the problem? Why is there no foreign direct investment in South Africa? And they gave a very interesting explanation. None of them said BEE, but they said South Africa's domestic capital is not investing. It's not investing in industrial labor-intensive activities. It is doing other things, so to speak, but they keep a lot of money to themselves. They don't do this. They don't support. They don't come to the party when it comes to actual factory development, actual industrial development. So even when we come, we're going to take the money where they are taking it. That is the attitude. None of that has to do with this non-tariff barrier you are attributing to BEE. I'm still to meet evidence. I'm still to get evidence of capitalists who have a problem with BEE.
So, let me put it to you this way. This is a reason why, and I think it was not wise, by the way. This is the reason why. When I say this is the reason, BEE is a reason, that sector charter in telecommunications is a reason why when our president visited the White House, he put forth an olive branch to Donald Trump for Starlink. That was BEE. That was a direct address to the question of BEE, right? I think personally he should not have done that on a case-by-case basis. I think he should have had a conversation, is what I'm trying to say, on a general framework of how to get foreign direct investment into the country in exchange for other concessions that foreign companies make to help the economy, or to help money in the economy move faster.
I think Hlelo, even if South Africa removes both black economic empowerment policies and affirmative action policies, you would have noticed that the origins actually of affirmative action is the United States itself. Even if these policies would be removed, there wouldn't be foreign direct investment, because we're all, at least for now, misdiagnosing the problem. Since you cannot provide a study or an actual company, or except Starlink. I thought you were going to say Starlink at some point, but there is no evidence to the effect that investors have a problem with. For instance, let me take an example. One of the regulated, and you discussed this in your article on Able. I want us to go to that now. Very interesting observations I saw you make. But American capital went into China, regardless of the fact that it's one of the most heavily regulated markets, more regulated than South Africa.
Right.
Capitalists are like that. They will go and operate in Nigeria, in the Niger Delta. Now, there it's not non-tariff regulations. It is war. It's a country, part of the country that is prone to constant violence. But they will go then. They are in Eastern DRC. So there is a misdiagnosis. But let's go to Apple. Apple's investment. Apple operates in China, regardless of the historically heavy regulations since Xi Jinping, Deng Xiaoping opened China, but it's still one of the most regulated markets in the world. Capital is there operating. Where do we find this idea that non-tariff barriers are destructive?
Right, but now look at what China, in the same article, we write in detail about what China has had to do in return to facilitate Apple's success in China. It's exactly the same argument what South Africa has to do in return to facilitate the success of foreign direct investment. Okay, Apple put $550 billion since 2015 into China, but China has created a conveyor belt of highly skilled mechanical, electrical engineering, chemical engineers, and so on, to be able to fit into, to produce skills and technology to fit into, jobs that are being created, into plans to resource companies that are making products in China. Okay, they created specific policies to create the skills that can fit the demand that companies have for labor. Okay, and not just specific policies from a skill standpoint, but from a cost of labor standpoint. Okay, people don't necessarily want to work for Apple in China. Okay, but it's a stepping stone in order to get to the point where you can work for Huawei as a Chinese-owned company.
Yeah,
we in South Africa have not taken foreign direct investment as a stepping stone to develop our own products. Okay, because what we're concerned about is, hey, can we be part of your product through co-ownership in something called BE, right? But we're not taking steps to create a conveyor belt of modern skills that fit the requirement of foreign direct investment when it comes into South Africa. So look at it today.
But Hlelo, that's still not evidence, or rather, that's still not grounds to support the idea that capital has a problem with non-tariff barriers.
I just don't know how else to put it to you, because if you think about the South Africa share of foreign direct investment in the world, where it is today versus where it was in 1994, 1995, and 96, during the time of optimism in South Africa, it is at its lowest point possible.
But how is that because of BEE, or maybe let's leave BEE. Right. How is that due to non-tariff barriers? When you have just explained a successful story of non-tariff barriers, the Chinese.
Right. So, but this is exactly where we are now in China, is that American capital, European capital, and other forms of capital have come into China since 2001, hoping that China was going to open up its own market so that what is manufactured in China is sold in China. And what they've all found out is that actually China wants to manufacture in China, wants to learn from your technology. Let's not use other words. Let's use very polite words. They want to learn from your technology, and they want to turn around and export back to you. Okay, so Apple sells to the rest of the world more than it sells inside of China, despite the fact that product is made in China. But that's the case with most products, right? So the success you are talking about is exactly what's causing the problem today, is that China hasn't opened up as a consumer market. It's opened up only as a manufacturing market for the world to endow it with technology. South Africa, by the way, has an advantage over China because it's opened up its own market for consumption, but South Africa has not opened up its own market for manufacturing to supply the rest of the world. And it hasn't opened up because of these non-tariff barriers that I'm talking about. If you want to operate in South Africa, you have to exhibit certain rights to do so. And the first right to do so when you situate in South Africa is, let me find a local partner. And I'm saying to you that if you want, you can do that, but that's the slowest way to move capital. There's another way to move capital. You should say to companies, can you contribute to the Wits University, the UCT University, the Stellenbosch University, the University of the North have an endowment fund. Can you
Yeah,
contribute
I get that.
billion-
But that would
Yeah.
still be a non. There is a way of, in my view, arguing against BEE and all of that, without saying non-tariff barriers don't work. You could just say maybe BEE hasn't worked. Most of us might actually agree with you, and then say, okay, let's divert capital to skills development as a non-tariff barrier, like you're arguing, or that they will put a certain percentage into some investment fund, which we then divert to certain industrial projects that support small businesses and all of that. I get that, but the global argument you're making is Trump is not comfortable with non-tariff barriers. And I don't know.
Yes.
I mean, the United States is also a very heavily, some sectors there, I mean, the agriculture sector is heavily subsidized. You can't compete with them.
So this is a point that I try to make also in the paper. Okay, that we should actually, because the World Trade Organization is broken and there is no arbitrator anymore, right? The world should welcome the opportunity to sit across from the United States to make sure that this doesn't happen again, okay? That these trade deals that are being negotiated are not being negotiated just solely for the benefit of one country. They're being negotiated for the benefit of fixing the global world trade order, okay? This is the exact reason that I want, that I say, if countries like South Africa realized what they needed to do internally, okay, to make capital flow a little quicker inside the country, right? And by the way, I want to just share something with you. Apple, as I said, invested $550 billion in China. Do you know where the money went to? That money went to financing the very skills that China put through a conveyor belt in universities. If South Africa got a shot, if South Africa got a shot in the arm of $100 billion, what do you think that would do to the university system?
Okay.
It'll do amazing things.
My
right?
time is unfortunately up, Hlelo. But
Yes,
thanks
sir. Well,
indeed.
thank you for having me.
Yeah. Thanks indeed
Indeed.
for your
Thank you.
time as well. That's Hlelo Giyose speaking to us from Boston, Massachusetts, trying to make sense of the trade war and the tariff wars by Donald Trump. Bantwana Benkosi, that's it from me here on Power Talk.